A to Z Sports live on a Wednesday, still here at SEC Media Days in Hoover, Alabama. The Vols went through it yesterday with head coach Josh Heupel, wide receiver Velus Jones Jr., and cornerback Alontae Taylor. And I did a podcast, audio-only podcast with Trey Wallace, a Rocky Top insider, yesterday afternoon. That podcast came out this morning on the A to Z Sports podcast feed. It'll be out there on the A to Z Sports Podcast Network later on this morning as well. We had a really good conversation, and something that came out of it that's really going to lead this show is the big difference between Josh Heupel and Jeremy Pruitt, and a story that I believe has gone untold over from last season that I think needs to be told because it adds a lot of context to what happened last year with the Vols football team. So an untold story about why, and that adds to why Josh Heupel will be 98 times better than Jeremy Pruitt as Vols head coach. So we'll get your reaction to this story that Trey Wallace told me on that podcast. We'll play that audio here for you in a couple minutes. Want to know your reaction to that because I feel like it's going to piss some people off, which is always interesting. Then we have a question. Do you buy or sell Josh Heupel flipping the Vols culture in one offseason? Because I do think that was one of the biggest takeaways from Josh Heupel and everything he said yesterday is the change of culture in just 6 months on the job. Who do you want to win the Vols starting quarterback job this season? We'll also play you a comment from Josh Heupel yesterday as well. And then I'll give an update on the NCAA investigation and really how that's impacting Tennessee this offseason and as they kind of wait to figure out what the hell is going to happen with it. So, Zach, welcome in. Hope you're having a good week so far. I'll be heading back. I'll be back in Nashville tomorrow morning for the show, but we're going to have a good wrap-up with throwing shade at the end here at SEC Media Days.
Man, I was and plus we get throwing shade, which I'm trying to debate between two of my shades. One is ridiculous that you may have seen, and the other one, you may have seen it as well. It's a little bit more inside media, but I think before I tweet. And usually I just don't tweet because what is it worth, right? But I did read something that really pissed me off. And I thought it was lazy, and I thought it was old and decrepit. It was a bad take. So I may do both of them now that I've teased them. But got a big show on the horizon, on that Hoover horizon maybe possibly, here live on this Wednesday on A to Z Sports. We're broadcasting live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and on Facebook. Make sure you retweet the broadcast so we pop up in your Twitter followers timeline. That would help us out a great deal. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Got more things going out on YouTube and on Facebook. Facebookers, what's going on? More people will roll in here over the next 5 to 10 minutes. As you guys do, please share the show. Sharing is caring. Bottom left corner of your screen, share now to public. That is share now to public. And as Austin mentioned at the beginning of the show, I mean, we try to cover you from all angles, right? So if you watch it live, maybe you do watch it live, maybe not. We have you covered on the audio-only version. Subscribe to both of our channels, which is a live channel and our podcast network that you'll hear this Trey Wallace full audio on. That is on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, so we got you covered there. We are a full-service digital media company that is expanding even bigger in 2021 that we've been working on all summer, but that is for a later date. Today is about stories, and it is about the Tennessee Volunteers. Let's get this party started.
All right, let's do it officially. Welcome to A to Z Sports. I'm Austin Stanley. He is Zach Bingham. We are powered by BetMGM. Make sure you follow us all over social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, TikTok. We're Nashville's on-demand sports talk network, and we go live every weekday morning at 8 Central Time. Got to thank our sponsors because they truly make it happen for us, and they help out you guys. RentersWarehouse.com, the professional landlords in the Nashville area. Mandu, the Pulse of Fitness, where one 15-minute workout equals 5+ hours in the weight room at mandu.com. Your first workout is absolutely free. Wilson County Hyundai, if you need a new ride, head out to wilsoncountyhyundai.com in Lebanon for their inventory. Calvin and Settle, brand new hardwood floors and finishings. They're simply at calvinandsettle.com. And the Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care. So, we'll talk about Josh Heupel a lot today because I think he did a fine job yesterday in his first SEC Media Days. It was vanilla, nothing super spicy. But I did talk to Trey Wallace, a Rocky Top Insider, yesterday afternoon after the Vols were done. He's got some great pieces up at RockyTopInsider.com. And Trey, honestly, is kind of a throwback beat guy. He does a lot of investigative stuff. He has a lot of sources inside the program where social media has changed how somebody covers a team. And this story that he told me 2 stories about Jeremy Pruitt. The first one, the second one will be the audio we play. The first one was about how Jeremy Pruitt, in the middle of the season last year, before Game 5, just decided on his own to install a brand new defensive formation. And he didn't install it in practice. He installed it on the whiteboard in a meeting and just had a coach draw it up. And they said, here's 6 plays, go out there and execute. That's something that can be done in the NFL, Zach. We know that that's not something that can be done in college football with athletes who are not, football czars or football super smart who've been doing this at the professional level. But Jeremy Pruitt was overcomplicating so many different things. But the big story is what happened in Auburn and how Jeremy Pruitt continued to get in the way and to hurt his quarterback. Here's Trey Wallace from our conversation yesterday.
Don't have the small mistakes that turn a game around where you could win. Same thing happened at Auburn last year where Jared Garantano, Tennessee's on the 12-yard line going in, and Jeremy Pruitt decides, he wants to call up to Chaney and say, hey, Chaney, I want to pass here, run this play. And Chaney's like, what are you talking about? And Jeremy's run the play. So they run that stupid play where Jarrett kind of rolls out and passes, and it's returned for 99 yards for a touchdown. And Jarrett's looking at the sideline like, we've never run this play before in this position. What are you doing? That's the thing, Austin, this year, that you're not going to see a problem with Tennessee.
And that sucks, too, because you know who gets all of the blame for that. That's Jared Garantano.
It's on Jared.
It's on him.
But they had never run that play before in that position.
And that's just being an awful coach.
Yeah, that's Jeremy Pruitt.
That was a snippet of the story that I don't think has been told before. I was talking to some other people last night at dinner about that story. But that was a huge play, Zach. You remember Smoke Monday from Auburn just picked it off on the goal line, took it all the way back, and that decided that game. And everybody is always so quick to blame number 2 over the last several seasons, where Jeremy Pruitt is consistently putting his players in a bad situation, whether it's the quarterback right there in a play they've never run before in a certain situation that doesn't make sense, but he overrides the offensive coordinator to call that play, or whether it's installing a brand new defense middle of the week on a whiteboard and asking guys who just moved to the linebacker position in Jeremy Banks and Quavaris Crouch to learn it on a whiteboard and expecting them to execute and them just getting blown out every week, it seems like. Jeremy Pruitt was a bad coach, putting his players in bad situations. And I think Josh Heupel understands how to put his players in good situations, and that's proven by having top 5 offenses under his resume at several different spots.
Well, I think what I take away from this story is you can't put bad players in bad situations. You can put bad players in good situations to see what happens. But in this particular scenario, Jared Garantano proved that he was a bad player. He was a bad football player. He was no good. He was not good enough to be an SEC quarterback. But this particular play, and I remember it like it was yesterday, you look back and you say, is this, hindsight's 2020. Could that have changed the trajectory of the season? They win their first 2 games against South Carolina and Missouri. Then they lose 4 straight to Georgia, Kentucky, Alabama, and Arkansas. A&M is postponed. Then comes Auburn. We all know the end of that game, they lose. But that was the deciding play of that game. Yeah. If some buts, we know. But if they win that game, the season, I think, is viewed because they don't go on to lose 6 straight and 7 out of their last 8. They have that win, and that was against 23rd ranked Auburn. That's a massive if, but it is coaching malpractice to put bad players in bad situations. You can't do it. We talk about Vanderbilt all the time. That's Vanderbilt's problem. Vanderbilt has a lot of below average to average players. They have to play above their means to win and take advantage of maybe the mistakes. That's how Vanderbilt has beaten Tennessee in the past. Mm-hmm. Tennessee is not used to having those type players, but they have in the last couple of years. And their coaches have put them in bad spots, and I think that's just a great example of it.
Yeah, so I want to know your guys' reaction to this story, because Trey Wallace told me this yesterday. My jaw dropped, and I was like, good Lord, what a ridiculous situation last season was. So let's ask you guys, what is your reaction to this Jarrett Guarantano, Jeremy Pruitt story from last year? I will play the audio again. But first, let me tell you guys about our friends over at the Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care. Make sure you know who to go to and who to trust whenever that injury pops up in life. You have to learn how to deal with it. You have to go to the right doctors who will get you on the path to being back at full health in an efficient manner. And the Bone and Joint Institute, they can take you every step along the way right there in Franklin, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care, boneandjointtn.org.
Don't forget BetMGM. Download the app today. Risk-free $600 bet. Code ATOZ Sports. You can download that app. Austin and I have been having a great time throughout the last couple of months participating in Parlay Boost. They give you free bet Monday, which we've kind of, I don't know, we may have outsmarted, but if if the Texans win the Super Bowl, we have it. But I don't think that's going to happen. BetMGM, code ATOZ Sports. Download the app today.
All right, so I'm going to play the audio again. So I'll set the table for you. This is the Auburn game. Tennessee is down 13-10 in the third quarter. They're currently on a 60-plus yard drive, taking up 5 minutes. They're in the red zone with a chance to take the lead or at the very least tie the game at 13. And then here's the story that Trey Wallace tells about Jeremy Pruitt getting in the way and essentially throwing Jarrett Guarantano under the public bus. Here's the story.
Don't have the small mistakes that turn a game around where you could win. Same thing happened at Auburn last year where Jarrett Guarantano, Tennessee's on the 12-yard line going in, and Jeremy Pruitt decides, he wants to call up to Chaney and say, hey, Chaney, I want to pass here, run this play. And Chaney's like, what are you talking about? And Jeremy's run the play. So they run that stupid play where Jarrett kind of rolls out and passes, and it's returned for 99 yards for a touchdown. And Jarrett's looking at the sideline like, we've never run this play before in this position. What are you doing? That's the thing, Austin, this year, that you're not going to see a problem with Tennessee.
And that sucks, too, because you know who gets all of the blame for that. That's Jarrett Guarantano.
It's on Jarrett.
It's on him.
But they had never run that play before in that position.
And that's just being an awful coach.
Yeah, that's Jeremy Pruitt.
That's Trey Wallace. The full conversation is on the A to Z Sports podcast feed this morning. We'll be up on the A to Z Sports Podcast Network later on this morning as well. Zach, I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? And I think you can have hope for Josh Heupel being a competent coach that can manage situations and not just think he's the smartest guy in the room, because a lot of what you heard from Pruitt was that he felt he was the smartest guy in the room. And Skylar says, no disrespect, I don't care about the JG or JP situation, neither on the team anymore here. I honestly feel like I need to tell people this story because Vol fans for years were just down Jarrett Guarantano's throat about how much he sucked and how much he ruined games.
He did.
Don't
support him. He did. There's one situation.
Hold on. But how many other times? Look, I'm not saying Jarrett Guarantano was a good quarterback. I'm not saying Jarrett Guarantano was a good quarterback at Tennessee, but I do think it's only fair to him to fully understand, or to understand as much as we possibly can, about how the head coach was putting him in an awful situation on a play they've never run before in the red zone. You don't run that play in the red zone on the road against Auburn at all. Like, that's just stupid. And Jeremy Pruitt was consistently doing that with his players last year, and Josh Heupel's not going to. And that's a big deal for Tennessee fans moving forward.
Yeah, I just don't think that this story tells the Guarantano. Nobody cares about all of this stuff, right? Because you have to win football games in the SEC. You can't make the mistakes that he made. This is one circumstance, and it justifies why both of them are no longer Tennessee Volunteers, right? So that's, I think, all this story does. Looking ahead, now that's a different conversation, but I don't think that this one story tells the full story of Jared Garantano or Jeremy Pruitt. They both were extremely bad.
Context.
They both were bad. This does not take any. I think zero. I think nothing different of Jared Garantano's quarterbacking skills. Even he threw the damn ball. And we forget about that. I feel like you're pushing this all on Pruitt, and it's not all on Pruitt. A lot of it is in this situation, but the quarterback still has the opportunity to throw the ball away, check it down, do something else, and he didn't do that.
I sympathize with Jared Garantano.
Nobody cares.
Dealing with that guy, and
nobody cares. I don't sympathize for a damn person. If you throw pick
that's
sixes,
you then. That's fine.
Like he did, you shouldn't be sympathizing.
Why can't I can sympathize with whoever I want to sympathize with, Zach? I can do that. I can have empathy. I can have sympathy, all that stuff. If you're going to be the other way around, I don't care. But I'm just telling you what I felt like I needed to do. I feel like I need to tell this story.
Yeah, you weren't very sympathetic during the season.
I know because I thought Jared
one
Garantano
story changed your mind.
It doesn't change. I'm not completely flipping on this. I think it's only fair to the player to add extra context to how bad the situation was. That's my only point here, is that Jeremy Pruitt was consistently getting in the way of his players and making their jobs harder when their jobs were already hard enough because they didn't have all the talent in the world. Again, Henry To'oTo'o was spending more time lining up Jeremy Banks and Quavaris Crouch at linebacker than he was focusing on his job on that play, which is why he consistently looked like he was getting beat and why he probably didn't want to come back anymore. And so when you're trying to install a new defense in the middle of the week, when you know your linebackers are not the sharpest group in the bunch outside of To'oTo'o, why are you consistently doing this? I think it's only fair to call out coaches who make bad decisions and put their players in bad situations. And yes, I do sympathize with the college athlete who's put in a bad situation by a stupid coach. That's my point here.
No one cares. Get the job done, win football games. That's at the end of the day.
Thanks. Great analysis. I appreciate your work.
Is that not the truth? That's all. That's a pile of you-know-what, Austin. You were screaming the same damn thing during the Vols season, and now because it's been six months and you've cooled down a little bit, and I just think you've changed your tune, which I don't think is
because I got
correct.
extra information. That
tells us that solidifies that both were bad. We knew that before. I knew that before this show. Correct?
Yes, we knew they were both bad, but I think the why I feel like this is a story worth telling today is because now Tennessee has a head coach who is an offensive guy and knows how to run an offense, and he can take the 3-star quarterback recruit and have him throw for 3,500 yards in a season at UCF. How does that translate to the SEC? We don't know yet, but we'll figure that out. But at least he had the success doing it on offense in the SEC with Missouri a couple years ago, even if it was with Drew Lock and that offense at Missouri putting up a lot of points. But it makes me feel more confident that the players maybe aren't as bad as the coaching was making them look. When it comes to specific situations, the coaches were not enhancing the players. They were hurting the players in situations.
The Tennessee Volunteers will yield the same result if they don't find a quarterback. Not saying something that anybody else doesn't know, but that's been the case of Tennessee football for decades. They haven't found a quarterback.
I don't disagree with that at all.
So it didn't matter if Pruitt called the play or didn't. Garantano was not the quarterback to win games. He was going to lose games regardless. He didn't have it in him. He was not a good football quarterback player. That's just the facts. So we move forward to the future and ask this question: do you buy or sell Josh Heupel flipping the Vols culture in one offseason? I think you could have stopped short and been like, yeah, because it's come from the dumps. But I do like in one offseason. Can that be flipped in a very short amount of time? That's the question we're going to be asking you guys.
Yeah, first, Zach, tell everybody about Calvin and Subtle, then I'll talk to you guys about really what was said yesterday. Velus Jones Jr. with a killer quote about what Josh Heupel has done with this locker room in the last 6 months. But first, Zach, Calvin, and Subtle.
Yeah, 615-448-6414 or online at Calvin and Subtle. If you're in Middle Tennessee and you want to rip up all that old carpet and replace it with hardwood floors, there's one place to go, and that is Calvin and Subtle. They'll hook you up, I'm telling you. And they have from luxury to cost-effective hardwood floors. They've got you covered. 615-448-6414. Once you pick out your perfect hardwood floor, just 1 to 2 weeks, they come in there, order the material, and install. So very, very quick turnaround with Calvin and Subtle. Go online or give them a call and find your perfect hardwood flooring for your home today. 615-448-6414.
BetMGM, download the app. By the way, congrats to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning the NBA title last night. BetMGM is where to go for all of your sports gambling and sports betting needs. Download the app, use our code ATOZ Sports. You get a risk-free bet up to $600 with your first deposit and your first bet. That's BetMGM. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. You must be 21 years or older, must be present in Tennessee. And for gambling problem support, call the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789. Here live on a Wednesday. We have Throw and Shade coming up, but Josh Heupel, I think the biggest story of Josh Heupel talking to the media yesterday at SEC Media Days was about the culture, the connection, the relationships that he has built with his players and having them be proud to be a Tennessee Volunteer athlete. You know, they've done all the events, right? They've played paintball, they did kickball, they did a home run derby at the Vols baseball field, they did Top Golf at Neyland Stadium, they've done cookouts, all this stuff, right? And it all sounds good. And on social media, it looks like these guys are hanging out. Velus Jones Jr. talked about the brotherhood, but I specifically asked Velus Jones Jr. yesterday, like, what about Josh Heupel's personality makes him relatable to players off the field that helps build these connections? And here was his quote. He has an amazing personality. He's a real open guy. Coach Heupel really interacts with the players. He's always around us. He's very involved. He's always around. You always see his face. And here's the kicker. I'm proud to go to war for that man this fall. So that was Velus Jones Jr., who's known Josh Heupel for 6 months. And so do you buy or sell Josh Heupel's ability to flip the culture in just this one off season? And does it translate to anything positive on the football field? Because we know it, Zach. With Butch Jones, with Jeremy Pruitt, it might have been good at times, but it ended all horribly. And it was like drill sergeant with Jeremy Pruitt. It was like you were an Army cadet. You could not have fun. Zero fun, sir. All of that stuff where Josh Heupel's trying to make it light again. So do you buy or sell this?
Well, I always question, you don't want an overcompensation. And I think,
right.
Pruitt had the Saban mentality, do your job, stick to the rules, hit, tackle, all of those things, the fundamentals. But, I think the culture is interesting because, they had, Tennessee was running a dirty program. Call a spade a spade. Philip Fulmer and Jeremy Pruitt were running a dirty program. So I think I'm trying to see through the tea leaves that is Heupel doing these things for team camaraderie, or on top of team camaraderie, is it for new eyes to say this is no longer a dirty program? These guys care about each other. We're having fun. Fun doesn't necessarily always win you football games, but I do think that the perception of all the things that you say make it seem that they care about one another and they are there on their own accord, not being paid to be there, right? And there's a difference between that. So, and that's NIL rules aside. But I do think that the culture will improve, but you're starting from a really bad base, right? So anything is better.
Yeah. More from Velus Jones Jr. yesterday says that after workouts, players don't just leave and go back to their dorms or wherever. They hang out for an hour or so and talk about whatever. And he said at the end of the day, it's about brotherhood, and that they really have emphasized building a culture and creating that connection and knowing each other better on the human being level where, I buy it. Like, I think it helps. It's not going to be the decision maker if the Vols win 8 games versus 5 games next year. But I do think knowing your teammates, respecting your teammates, and believing in them and getting to know them will only help you when it gets into the hot practices and the tight game situations where you can really lean on that connection with each other to break through a tough moment. But it's not. So I buy it. I think it's desperately needed. You mentioned all the guys who are getting paid. I mean, it's not a surprise that you see the guys who all left and transferred to Oklahoma or wherever they went to right after Jeremy Pruitt got fired and try to connect the dots and saying, who was on the payroll, right? Like, so
those
the
are
guys
the best players.
Yeah, right. But the guys,
I mean, the best players get paid. Ask Alabama's quarterback.
Yeah, right. Bryce Young getting $1 million in NIL money, which is insane. But again, like you think, like, it's pretty obvious to see who wants to be here in Tennessee and who didn't, and who is being paid to be here and say, all right, checks have stopped, I'm out, or cash is no longer flowing, I'm out of here. So I buy it in it being a ground floor, establishment of a culture. I don't know how much it translates to anything on the field, but it's at least a positive step moving forward that can help you out in some recruiting. Because, Zach, in recruiting, you know this, if a recruit comes to campus, they're hanging out with the current players. The current players can either say, yeah, man, like, they can either tell the truth that it's a great atmosphere or tell the truth that it sucks here and you shouldn't come here. And I've heard stories.
Yeah, hey, talk to my bag man who will get you paid, right?
Right, all that stuff, yeah.
And I thought this was a very good comment from, it seems to be a Kentucky fan, from Corey. Corey says he's buying it. He says he watched Kentucky do it as a Kentucky fan, and Mark Stoops, saying may take a little while to yield results because it will depend on what kind of players you could pull, but it definitely can change the culture. I think that is a great comment and pretty eye-opening of what Mark Stoops is doing and has done with Kentucky football. Austin, you said it yourself. You feel like Kentucky is a much better football team and program right now than Tennessee, which I don't think we would have ever thought we would have said, 6-7 years ago. But that's the case. Can Tennessee kind of take that same approach with better facilities and more of a prestigious football program and turn that into a winner more quickly? I think that, to answer the question, I will buy it. And I think here's the change based on what we were talking about earlier on the show in your podcast with Trey Wallace. What that solidified for me is Jeremy Pruitt didn't have an identity. And he had bad players or questionable players without an identity. You don't know what the hell to do. On that Auburn play, he didn't know what the hell to do, and it turned into 6 points the other way and a loss. I do think Josh Heupel, as a head coach in game coaching decisions, has had some experience. Pruitt did not. He was a defensive coordinator and then automatically, a head coach. I think Heupel can take how he has managed a program, and that will expedite the process of cleaning things up and creating a better culture than what Pruitt and Fulmer was doing all that BS because they did it in the 90s. He was still sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. And in that newspaper, he was paying players. Philip Fulmer should not go down as he will be immortalized as a Tennessee Volunteer, but I will always hold him accountable for cheating his love of Knoxville. He cheated you guys, and that would piss me off. And with the help of Jeremy Pruitt, who didn't know what he was doing, I think this brand new culture turn and change with some experienced guys. Now, albeit from, Central Florida, still, that's better. I would rather manage a ton of people than just being an employee and then all of a sudden been handed a big manager role with a lot of scrutiny. As we know, that's what Tennessee's job yields. So I'll buy it. I'm more bullish on Josh Heupel than I was on Dooley, than I was on Butch, than I was on Pruitt. I thought Pruitt was going to be better than he was, but he was really bad.
Yeah, because Pruitt said all the right things publicly early on. But anyway, so do you buy or sell Josh Heupel flipping the Vols culture in one offseason? Let's read some more comments. Then he says, if the players on the team right now are buying into Heupel and his system, than good, because I don't think that's been the case for multiple recent coaches. I know it wasn't the case when Derek Dooley took over for Lane Kiffin, because those players loved Lane Kiffin for that 1 year, and they immediately did not respect Derek Dooley and just decided to not show up to his intro team meeting and type of stuff like that.
And the big question is, does his system work in big boy football?
Sure.
Is it Lane Kiffin and Hugh Freeze system that works in big boy football, or is it Rich Rodriguez?
It scored points at Missouri, right? Because Missouri had the number one offense in the SEC.
Not as a head coach. That doesn't matter.
Hold on. I'm not done yet. But because the offense worked at Missouri, but what happened to Missouri? They didn't win a bunch of games those years with Drew Lock. They were scoring a lot of points. But Barry Odom, who is a defensive head coach, was having his defense get a lot of points scored on it. And so then Barry Odom looks bad because Josh Heupel's offense is moving so fast that it's hanging out his defense. And so that's something to keep an eye on, of what's the balance here for Josh Heupel of running his offense without just crushing and crumbling his defense.
Yeah, I don't want to compare apples to oranges, because that's what I think that is. I'm not talking about offensive coordinators becoming head coaches. I'm talking about head coaches becoming head coaches in premier jobs. That's what I think that's the correlation of what we're talking about, because Rich Rod is a great example. That stuff worked, and then it didn't work in Michigan. You don't want to recreate that. I think Heupel has a better opportunity to succeed. He's got to get a quarterback, and he has to find the right personnel on his coaching staff, his defensive coaching staff, because the hardest part is managing all of these guys. Only a few coaches can really do it very well, can really manage a lot of people and get their system ingrained in their football roster.
Right. Jeff Rubel says selling one off season is too hard. Louis says sell. Brian says not at all. Fiction. He's going factor fiction on this. Charlie brings up that Josh Heupel's had more of an off season than Pruitt did with Harrison Bailey, which is true. And we'll get to the quarterbacks here in a little bit. Skyler says he's buying it because it speaks volumes that this offseason he's hearing vocal leaders this year. Blaine says buy. Culture doesn't necessarily mean winning 10 games. Just look at Ole Miss. And you know that, of what Lane Kiffin's been able to do. And
year one expectations are lower, right? So, and especially with the bowl ban probably looming. I thought the love of the show for me goes to Billy Jones. I'm going to toss a love, all Billy. Right. I'm tossing a love Billy's way, because I think Billy hits it on the head. We can talk about all the stuff he's done, but if it doesn't work, can Heupel adapt? And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the big decisions are made. That's what we found out, that it didn't work for Butch. It didn't work for Dooley. It didn't work for Pruitt. When things went wrong, can you adapt on the fly and say, okay, my system worked against lesser opponents, but it's not working now. Maybe I need to tweak some things. That, I think, justifies a good head coach. That's a great comment.
Rob, right there below Billy's comment, Rob says people probably said the same thing about Urban Meyer's offense at Utah. And I don't remember. I was like 14 or 15 years old when Urban Meyer got the head coach job at Florida, coming from Utah. But he did have Alex Smith, who was the number 1 overall draft pick that year. That was his quarterback. And, Mackenzie Milton was a really good player that Heupel had at UCF before that awful injury that he got. But, I don't remember what people were saying about Urban Meyer, but it's hard to play that game 15 years plus later where Urban Meyer's won 3 national championships.
Yeah, I think the only difference there is that Florida's a better program in Tennessee. We all know that. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that they had better players. Tennessee, in today's football, and I'll ask, and it's not like a backhanded question, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
What's the separation of actual football talent right now from UCF to Tennessee? I don't think it's that big of a difference, right?
I would agree.
And so I think that, for me, makes Heupel's job so much more difficult, because he's playing probably with equal talent, but much, much more difficult competition week in and week out. That's the difficulty of this job. And I bring that up because the Urban Meyer comment is that Florida back then they could recoup much better talent overall on the roster than Utah could in a very quick amount of time.
Yeah, and Joe Hinn says, I remember it was questioned, but Leak and Tebow made it work. For sure. And again, Ron Zook was not a very good head coach, but he recruited really well. So Ron Zook did not just have a bare naked roster after Steve Spurrier went to Washington. So it was still pretty loaded up for Urban Meyer to come in and just coach it up. Rob says it was just an offense we hadn't really seen at the time. Danny says Heupel has head coaching experience. He has SEC experience as an offensive coordinator, and is a completely different type of person from Pruitt. So I'll buy that it is changing the culture for sure, but for good or bad is what we'll see. And I was talking to more Vols beat writers yesterday too, because I don't really have a chance to get around Vols beat writers and kind of talk shop a little bit with what they're talking about. But they feel like Josh Heupel is a regular person. And normally when you come across head coaches or any type of coach at the college or the pro level, they don't feel like normal people. They've got a little psychopath to them and a little how they're wired differently to just go nonstop. But Josh Heupel feels like you can have a normal conversation with a guy, and that's good for the media. Is it good for the football program? Can he be successful because he's never had the eyeballs on him that he's going to as a head coach? And will a normal person feel pressure unlike a crazy psychopath coach, right? You get what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. And, he's 43. He's relatable, I think, to younger people. I think he has kind of the new age offense. I always think that always helps you, right? Because if you're willing to put an unorthodox scheme together, you're kind of more, I don't want to say down to earth, but not on the opposite end of the spectrum that we all felt Pruitt was, which is attention, sir, up. Like that does not resonate with young people. Sure as hell doesn't resonate with me. If I had a militaristic boss, I don't really know how to explain this. I'd tell that guy to kick bricks and go F himself. Now, that's me, but I do think that in this younger generation, they come up and they're more free thinking. They know about social media. They know about the rights that they yield and the word that they can speak. And where Pruitt probably comes from, back in the day where you shut up and you sit down for supper, right? And look, it's just the way of the world. I understand it, but Heupel kind of brings that new open-mindedness that I think younger players on possibly this roster and future rosters can resonate with.
Yeah, no doubt. A to Z Sports here live. A couple other comments. Steven says Tennessee was a bust last year due to lack of trust in their head coach. The talent is still there. I think they have talent on offense. We don't know about the quarterback. We'll get to that in a second. They don't have a lot of talent on defense. And that's going to be a problem because the offense might be able to score points, but the defense is going to be on the field for a lot of time, and we'll see how they hold up. John says, people forget that Heupel almost won a Heisman Trophy. He has been there as a player, relates to the current players better than the past 4 head coaches the Vols have had. And another thing that you kind of forget about Josh Heupel, yeah, he was a Heisman runner-up, but he was also a transfer. He went to a really small college at the beginning of his career and then transferred to Oklahoma and then had success. So there's a different level of relatability there with what we see with the transfer portal and all types of experiences that college athletes can have.
I think Josh Heupel, for me, and this is why I feel the way I do about Heupel heading into this season and the regime that he'll create over the next couple of years, I think he has more pros than cons. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because in when you hire a coach, especially in the situation they're in, you don't want to be the Houston Texans, where their whole situation is more cons than pros, right?
Yeah.
I do think Heupel brings more pros than he does cons, and I think that's why I'm excited about it.
All right, next question I want to ask you guys is, who do you want to win the Vols starting quarterback job? Who do you want to win the Vols starting quarterback job? We'll play a clip of Heupel talking about the timeline for the quarterback competition here in a second. But first, let me tell you guys about Mandu. The Pulse of Fitness 115-minute workout equals 5+ hours in the weight room. That's mandu.com. Your first workout is absolutely free. Go check it out. Full body electronic muscle stimulation. It's something that not a lot of people have seen or felt, but it is legitimate. If you want to achieve your fitness goals, go check them out, mandu.com. They've got the science of electronic muscle stimulation and also the intelligence and the education with their trainers being highly qualified to help you achieve your fitness goals. That's mandu.com. And they're about to be here in Birmingham, too, in the next couple of weeks. They're in the process of opening the Birmingham studio. Mandu's growing across the Southeast quick. Mandu.com, your first workout's free.
Yeah, don't forget, download the BetMGM app today. They have you covered when it comes to sports betting. Plus, they hook you up. There's a shorter hiatus between end of NBA Finals and beginning of NFL football season and college football season, for that matter. So that's a great thing. Download the app today. You can get a risk-free $600 bet. Promo code ATOZ Sports. They'll hook you up. It is a great app. I haven't told my story, but I am an honest man. I lost $150 last night because I had Suns plus 6.5.
That Devin Booker 3 would have been nice at the end there, huh?
That Devin Booker 3.
He missed a couple.
He sucked. No, he didn't miss a couple. He sucked last night. He couldn't hit the front side of the barn.
He's trying to get, like,
I was frustrated with the Suns at the end of that game because Giannis deserved to win that game. And that's why they did. His role players stepped up. Middleton stepped up. Even Drew Holiday stepped up. Where Chris Paul and Ayton and Booker, all they faded. They faded into the background and cost me $150.
Yeah. Speaking of Suns, the first time I've seen the sun in 2.5 days in Birmingham.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it looks nice back there. It's kind of drowning me out a little bit, but the sun shines out. All right, so Josh Heupel talking about the timeline of naming a starting quarterback yesterday at SEC Media Days.
Quarterback battle for us. We got 4 guys that are vying for it right now. 3 of them were there during the course of spring ball. I think it's really important that you give players an opportunity to grow from the last time that they stepped on the field in spring ball. You give them opportunity to understand your system better, grow physically and fundamentally throughout the course of the summer, and then you get into training camp. And guys are going to earn more reps. Guys are going to earn their way out of the race as well. But you got to give them that opportunity. I think it's imperative that your football team, offensively, defensively, staff, understand that when you pick a guy, he's earned the right to be your guy. Inevitably for him, there's going to be great plays. There's going to be a couple bad plays too. He's got to respond the right way, but the guys around him got to believe in him too. And so you got to go through that process. And as a guy earns the right to be our guy, that's when we'll name a starter.
So he's got four players that are going.
We don't know yet.
We have no idea. But I do find it interesting because we talked about this some yesterday. Remember, before he spoke at Media Days, Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer, was not going through spring practice. So the other 3 were Bailey, Maurer, and Hendon Hooker from Virginia Tech. They were there through spring practice. He's going to give Joe Milton an opportunity. Again, he brought Joe Milton in for a reason. And I think Joe Milton has a really good chance to win this job. And this is just kind of my gut right now after talking to people yesterday and listening to Heupel talk. He talked more about Milton when he was asked about the quarterbacks as a whole than naming specific other guys. And so I think it's between Milton and Harrison Bailey. And you have to see if Harrison Bailey does not win the job, does he stick around? And that's something that I do feel is probably interesting to watch because you need Harrison Bailey because you need multiple quarterbacks because injuries are going to happen. And the Vols have played like 3 to 4 quarterbacks over the last couple of years each season. So, and Raging Iguana says some other UT journalists have said that the job is basically Milton's to lose. I didn't hear it that strongly, but I do feel like people are expecting Joe Milton to get the opportunity to win the job pretty quick.
So if you are a Tennessee fan, you want the most accurate quarterback. That is who you want to win the job. Based on Milton's history, I don't think he is it, but you want the most accurate quarterback. So my vote, who do you want to win the job? The most accurate quarterback. Not the guy who has the most speed or the ability to maneuver out of trouble. Or I think with this quick-paced offense, you need a guy, and I'll give you an example based on my own experience with Ole Miss. Everybody knows who Matt Corral is now, but he was vying for a job a couple of years, 2 years ago, with a guy who couldn't throw. And the cream rises to the top when it comes to throwing accuracy. You don't want to get out there and Milton can't throw it out. I've seen Harrison Bailey. He has accuracy. My vote is Harrison Bailey. It will continue to be. I'm not cheering against Milton. I could give a damn. But I think Tennessee fans should be rooting for the guy with the most accuracy.
So it's interesting because Hendon Hooker and Velus Jones Jr. are really close. And so they've been getting a lot of work in together on their own, right? And then you see Harrison Bailey working out, in the offseason with a couple of the other wide receivers getting work in. So it's going to be Joe Milton's the new kid on the block who doesn't have these previous relationships where, he can go out and throw extra. That has to be kind of reworked from the very beginning, where the relationships with the previous guys are established. Brian Maurer, I feel like, is the outlier in this. He is probably fourth, but I do think he is a safety net because his familiarity with Heupel from when Heupel recruited him out of high school a few years ago, that he could be the worst case scenario, break glass in case of super emergency.
He's not accurate.
If the other three guys just flat out fail. So I think Joe Milton's going to win the job. I agree with you, Zach. I want to see Harrison Bailey win this, because if Harrison Bailey wins this job over Joe Milton, that makes me feel, based on what people are saying, that Harrison Bailey truly was the best quarterback, and that even with Joe Milton being brought in to maybe win the job, that Harrison Bailey rose to the occasion. I think that would be a big sign if Harrison Bailey starts September 2nd against Bowling Green on that Thursday night game.
Yeah, I've always been on the Harrison Bailey train. That's who I think should win. That's who I would like to win. I think he has the best upside. But I'm not in fall practice, so that is an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, no doubt. A to Z Sports here live on this Wednesday. I'm still live here in Hoover for SEC Media Days. This morning, Nick Saban, Vanderbilt start the day, and then I'll be heading back to Nashville this afternoon after the morning sessions wrap up. I did get an update yesterday from Trey Wallace about the NCAA investigation and wanted to touch on that a little bit. But first, Zach, tell everybody about Wilson County Hyundai.
Yeah, Wilson County Hyundai is where you need to get your next ride. WilsonCountyHyundai.com. They have inventory that will hook you up with your perfect make and model, whether it's the Sonata, the four-door sedan that I own, or the Elantra, or the Santa Fe, but they also have the brand new 2021 Palisade. It is a full-size SUV with third-row seating. It's got captain seats in the back and all the bells and whistles up front. You've got Apple CarPlay. It is nice. And the interior is comfortable. That is key when you're driving around, whether you're an SUV, you're hauling kids around, you're going on road trips. The Hyundai Palisade is the new age of SUV, and it looks great. Both Austin and I have test-driven that car. It is awesome. The Hyundai Palisade 2021, it will hook you up. WilsonCountyHyundai.com.
BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Download the app today. Use our code ATOZ Sports for your risk-free bet up to $600 with your first deposit and your first bet. That is BetMGM. Download the app. Take advantage of this because NFL training camps start next week. So there's going to be a lot of great opportunities to jump on some future odds with our guys Alan Bell and Brian Edwards. They will return on Friday with A to Z Sports Picks and really start to focus on college football and the NFL, as a lot of week one lines are out, plus futures there. Again, BetMGM, download the app, use our code ATOZ Sports. So I mentioned earlier, Trey Wallace and I talked a lot for about 30 minutes yesterday after the Vols went through SEC Media Days and talked a lot about a lot of different things. So you can hear that podcast wherever you watch this show or wherever you get your podcast, the A to Z Sports podcast stream on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever. But the update on the NCAA investigation, Zach, is it feels like the next 2 weeks we might get some more information. And that's kind of where people, like, I think we're waiting for that information to come out because we don't know if Tennessee feels like they have enough information right now to decide to self-impose. But over the next 2 weeks, that information might become more clear. Trey told me on that podcast that they've started to spend more money from March to April to May to June. They've increased their spending on the investigation each month, which means they're digging deeper or they're finding more things that makes the cost go up, which I thought was interesting. You don't really think about how you spend on an investigation, but they're self-investigating too. And so I really do think the next 2 weeks, more info will come out, and that will really determine on whether the Vols get self-impose a bowl ban, recruiting, visiting days reduction or scholarship reduction, whatever it might be. Now, I do find it interesting that Josh Heupel said yesterday that they expect and they're going to sign a full signing class in this cycle where most people expect scholarship reductions to happen. But Josh Heupel's going like he's going to sign 25 guys, which is the maximum. So he did go out and say that publicly, where he called it a speed bump whenever he was asked about it yesterday, which I think that's a pretty massive speed bump if you're asking.
Well, they told him to downplay it. He got prepped before he went.
But he can't say anything. Like he does because they don't know yet. And it's crazy that we're in July. They're a couple weeks away from fall camp, and they're still just waiting to find more information, which hopefully does come out in the next 2 weeks.
I expect them to self-impose a bowl ban, just rip a Band-Aid off and get it over with and see if the NCAA gives you grace and doesn't give you a second one. Because the recruiting thing does hurt you, but Tennessee's rebuilding. So, who cares if you go to a bowl game this year? Now, you got to make sure that the mindset is correct for your players and they feel like they are playing for something, even though they're playing for not a bowl bid. But I self-impose if I'm Tennessee because from the stories we heard, Austin, I mean, they are cheating. And stop paying Philip Fulmer. That would be my suggestion. Wow. And I think that was asinine. They're paying that guy $37,000, $36,000 a month to binge your school over. That makes no sense.
Yeah, well, I do think the next 2 weeks have potential for drama in Knoxville. If certain information comes out, I do find it to be very intriguing of how soap opera-ish it can get with Freedom of Information Act results coming out over the next couple of weeks too. So that's a quick update, nothing like crazy on the NCAA investigation, but we should know more in the next couple of weeks. A to Z Sports, John
question.
says,
is this wrong?
No. Well, I mean, he was fired, but he was told to retire. He
wasn't fired. He retired. That's wrong, Raging Iguana. That's why that's why I hold him accountable so much. He retired. They didn't can him. They should have fired him at the stake, and they didn't. Because of what he did.
Well, I mean, technically he retired.
That is the point. He did retire, and they
gave
him.
It was a Phil. We're going to move on from you. Do you want to retire instead of us firing you? I mean, they saved him. And Rob says they protected him. They didn't want to have Philip Fulmer, Philip Fulmer's done a lot of good for the university. He's done a lot of bad for the university more recently. But he was forced into retirement to save his face and to not ruin a legacy that for a guy who did win a national championship for the university, right?
But even though he cheated and he put everything on the university that he had built, he put up for grabs. And I say this because these are stone cold facts. Philip Fulmer is receiving $37,500 per month through the end of 2023 after retiring. So Raging Iguana, change your tune and be a chameleon, because they did. They didn't fire him. He retired.
They retired him. They forced him to retire. That is that's the technical term. He retired.
So, but if you want to come with technicalities to this show, I will retort with the real truth of technicalities. He was not fired. He was actually the opposite of what was said. He retired. And now he's trying to let time heal his image, even though the university is spending more money every single month of what he was controlling.
Yeah.
In cheating the school that he loves. I have a moral problem with that, because I have a moral compass of why people do what they do. And if you love something, don't cheat on them. And that's exactly what Philip Fulmer did to his university. And that would piss me off if I was a fan.
Oh, yeah. And I think he has, but that's just how it went down. He technically retired because he was told to do so instead of being fired. All right, Zach. Let's get to throwing shade here on this Wednesday. If you have shade to throw, we want to hear it. Throwing shade here on A to Z Sports to wrap up every Wednesday show. But first, I'm going to tell you guys about Renters Warehouse and renterswarehouse.com, the professional landlords in the Nashville area. Simply head to renterswarehouse.com to either find out how much your home can rent for, or you can do a lot of different things. You can see all their inventory across the mid-state, different types of inventory that you could rent out yourself, or turn your property into a cash flow machine every month by having Renters Warehouse do all the work, and then you collect all the money. Pretty easy as that at renterswarehouse.com.
BetMGM, promo code ATOZ Sports. Download the app today. All right, Austin, it is throwing shade.
Rob said, Zach got me fired up. Shade on Fulmer again.
No, I said my piece. I said the facts. I just don't think that don't reward somebody for screwing you. I'm anti that.
All right. Joe says he didn't cheat on them. He cheated for them, just like every other university does. Well, both. Anyway. But so, Zach, you said you have two shades?
I do.
You want to shade sandwich? Here,
yeah, that's
you
fine.
Do one. I do one. You do one.
Yeah, that's fine. Mine, I'll start with SEC Media Days. How about that?
Okay. Topical.
Yeah, it is very topical. Austin, did you see this guy walking around, and did you see this guy ask a question to Mark Stoops rocking the Alabama hat?
All right. So there was discussion about this.
Did you? Is that or am I wrong, or is that a Braves hat?
It is an Atlanta Braves hat. I did not see this guy yesterday. I did not see the Mark Stoops. I was busy doing a couple other things yesterday afternoon when Kentucky was going through it. But that is a Atlanta Braves hat, not Alabama. But again, I still think
it's still shade.
What
are you doing wearing a Braves hat at an SEC function as a reporter?
I think if you're a reporter and you're working, if you're on the job
for the Braves,
what?
I said the only way that you would be able to wear a Braves hat for me if you were working for the Braves, but you have no business being at SEC Media Days.
I just feel like if you're a reporter on the job, you don't wear any team stuff, regardless if it's a baseball team that you're a fan of. And you're covering SEC football. I don't think it's professional to wear team gear while you're covering an event related or not to that team gear as a professional media member. So the shade is still valid, but it was an Atlanta Braves hat, not an Alabama hat. The Alabama hat would have been ultimate primo.
They would have had to say something to him.
Probably. The only people wearing team gear should be the people that are working for the schools with the SIDs and the videographers and all the social media people that are following around the coach and the player at SEC Media Days. No other team gear. That's it.
All right, so
that's your first shade?
Yeah, that's my first shade. Shade, let's go through some comments. Nate says, shade on the COVID Delta strand, shut down Australia and sending a lot of people to the ICU. I mean, it's definitely having an effect. I don't know if I cannot say if Australia is shut down.
I think Nate is in Australia. Or he's from Australia.
Shut down is a harsh term.
Yeah, Nate is either from Australia or currently in Australia. I cannot remember which one.
Let's see. Set to suffer more pain. Sydney. Nah.
Nate is, yes, he's in Australia. So Nate is our Australia.
Borders shut and hardly. There you go. Sydney is in lockdown. So it definitely has gotten a hold of Australia. Wow. And that was reported Monday, June 28th. So that was a month ago. Well, yeah, almost a month ago. So I don't want to report anything that is not true, but Australia hit by, just like England hit by the Delta strain. We hope that the United States, I don't know, is immune. We have the good thing that the vaccine is more prevalent in the United States. That's a positive, but sometimes the Delta strain doesn't give a damn. All right, we digress. Bobby says throwing shade on billionaires hosting pissing contests in space. That was entertaining yesterday.
I have no idea what happened there. I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm out of the loop just because I've been in the SEC world.
So Jeff Bezos went to space for a couple hours and then came back down. Just to kind of say that he could do it. Now, I think that opens. Well, and the best part about it was he was interviewed after he went up in orbit and came down. There's a press conference, and he said, "This is the biggest BDE move I think you can do as Bezos." And say, "I just want to thank all of the Amazon employees and customers for paying for it." Like, directly a slap in the face. I felt like I was like, well, we paid for you to go to space because I ordered, some Amazon boxes yesterday. I guess you could do it and say what you want when you're Jeff Bezos.
Kelkin says it was 11 minutes total. Bobby says it's an 11-minute flight. He was anti-gravity for 4 minutes. But just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well, and it's building on it. I think that the exciting thing is he has the money to make people able to do that and experience that and get that going. And that would be unbelievable. If you could fly to space for 11 minutes, a lot of people with a lot of money would do that.
Yeah, just because it's such a different experience. No doubt about it. All right, so do we have more shade comments to get through? I did see Louis says shade on crappy animal owners like his neighbor to the west. Sorry, but animals rule his house. I agree. If anybody is mistreating an animal or a pet, they definitely are deserving of shade. I don't know the situation there, Louis. Danny says throwing shade in the last 20 years of Tennessee football, underachieving to the point where none of us are comfortable predicting any more than a 6-win season. Loyalty is painful sometimes. Danny, yep, for sure. Jeff says shade on parents who force their kids on roller coasters. I saw a girl completely bawling, crying, getting off a coaster this weekend. I mean, I don't have kids, so I don't necessarily know how to criticize or say, but sometimes I would assume a kid is going to be scared to do something and the parent can encourage or make their kid do this to experience their fears, and they probably would have fun on the roller coaster afterwards. But sometimes it probably backfires like that.
And ruins it, and they hate roller coasters for the rest of their life. You never know. That's the risk of parenting, right? There's no book. There's no handbook to say, hey, look, this is the right thing to do. You don't know.
Yeah. My shade, I could easily throw shade today on Talk About and how not everybody, way too many people at SEC Media Days start asking trying to ask a question and then just freeze and say, can you talk about that for a second? I hate talk abouts, but that happens at SEC Media Days every year. But my real shade, Zach, we talked about Kia with Blake Griffin yesterday with our sports trivia. My real shade is on the Kia road rager that was driving behind me on I-65 all the way down to Birmingham a couple days ago in the pouring down rain. This Kia SUV was so close to me, I could not see their headlights in pouring down rain. That's how close they were. I finally let them get by me, and they continued to do the same thing to every car within eyesight. And I cannot stand road ragers or crazy people like that. But then to do it in a downpour rain on the interstate was just flat out dangerous, where I was tense. I was gripping the steering wheel hard. There was a couple times I thought they were going to hit me. I didn't know what was going to happen, but crazy traffic in the rain, road rage, interstate does not all mix. And that Kia made me feel real pissed off on the road with all that. It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And I was so pissed off at that driver Monday afternoon. And it was for an extended period of time. It was for 10 minutes straight in a downpour, which felt like 30.
That's wild.
John says time for a brake test, Austin. Oh, excuse me. I sneezed there. But time for a brake test, says John Daniel. I couldn't do a brake test. It was a downpour of rain. I literally could not do anything about it. It was awful. But yes, live sneeze. I think that's the second time I've ever done that.
So my ending shade goes to and Austin, we have not talked about this because you've been on the road and it just kind of happened over the weekend. And I thought this would be the perfect time to air my grievance on whatever the hell this was. And this is old man complaining and writing a column. And column, look, I respect putting your opinion out there, right? So you've at least done that. But a man by the name of McGraw-Milhaven wrote something on Barrett Sports Media, and it was entitled this: "The real stars of podcasting are heard on radio." Here's the headline. Look, the truth is local radio hosts run circles around podcasting hosts in every single measurement. McGraw-Milhaven has more on his latest column. So I clicked on it, and I say this because I have done both. Austin, you have done both. We have been in the podcasting world, and we were on radio for a number of years. I think the polar opposite of this Yahoo. But I go on to read his column, and he states that he hosts a 4-hour morning radio show, and one of his lines within this column is, "The truth is local radio hosts run circles around podcasting hosts." There, I said it. He goes on to talk about advertising dollars, and this guy is so oblivious of where things are going and where things are not. And so you can have your opinion on this, but I disagree adamantly with having an hour of really good content instead of spacing them out in 12 segments, hitting an out time. Oh, okay, wait, way to go. You have timing. What people want to hear, and that's the definition of entertainment. That's why you are on radio or on podcasts or on the internet, is entertainment value and information and creativity. Podcasting is the way of the world, and that's where it's trending. And radio hosts do not run circles. A lot of time you hear sports talk radio hosts just open the mic and be like, "Hey, what do you guys want to talk about today?" And haven't done any homework or any prep because their lazy ass just relies on phone calls. Austin and I and everybody that works for our company, including Buck Rising, who is a radio host, but he got taught in the world of podcasting first, knows the grind and preparation that our company, A to Z Sports, makes sure our hosts go through each and every show. So adamantly disagree with this crap ass take by this guy named McGraw-Milhaven, who does a radio show of his own. Stop sipping coffee and reading the newspaper, bud, and start getting into the digital age. Don't let it pass you by, because before long, you'll be out of radio looking for a job.
I need to read the article because I'm not sure, and unfortunately, I'm going to give the guy a click. But to understand it, I think I need to read the article because I don't know, like, what does he mean by run circles around podcasters? Meaning that that radio hosts are more talented? Is that what he means?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are very talented people in radio. There are also very untalented people in radio. They're
Just
very
like
talented.
Podcasting, yeah, same.
And the same thing with podcasts, because everybody can have a podcast right now, but it doesn't mean you're like good at podcasting. Like it's so the guy sounds like he is grasping at straws to stay relevant and how he has to try to have a hot take about how he is more talented than podcasters. And it's just a blanket statement that I think the majority of people disagree with.
Here was another excerpt from the article. He says, how according to Bloomberg News, there are almost no podcasts that take in $20 million in ad sales a year. So he's now referencing advertising dollars in justification. But Dan Le Batard just inked a 3-year, $50 million deal in one advertiser with DraftKings.
Yeah.
This guy, you're like, are you sitting there? You can't say money's moving. Money's moving away. And so it was a headache to read. And I was about to go public with this instead of actually explaining it. But here's my problem with Twitter. If I come out with a strong opinion on Twitter, I know that people are going to come after me and respond. And I just don't care to respond to all of them. And so it may be a lazy factor or something that I don't want to do. I would rather just talk to them face to face or have them text me and me talk to them. That's why I love this platform. Mm-hmm. So that is my ending shade.
Good way to end it. All right, guys. We're wrapping up here from SEC Media Days today. I'm here in Hoover, headed back this afternoon. Hopefully the sun stays out. I don't have to drive in a downpour again. But yeah, SEC Media Days has been a success so far. Thanks again to the Nashville Sports Council. Head to NashvilleSports.com to volunteer for the Music City Grand Prix coming up August 6th to the 8th. So check that out. That they need volunteers. That's NashvilleSports.com for that. They've been a great sponsor of all of our SEC Media Days content. I've got another podcast that I'm going to have recorded later on today with a fun guest that I have in mind. We'll see how that goes. But hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you guys later on a Thursday back in home studio talking Titans once again, because Titans camp opens a week from today. So about to get real busy here. Have a great Wednesday, guys. See you later.
Adios.